The sun was beginning its descent over the sprawling city skyline when Marcus Wellington decided to take his private helicopter out for an evening flight. At 42 years old, Marcus had built an empire from nothing, transforming a small tech startup in his garage into a multinational corporation worth billions. His success had afforded him luxuries most people could only dream of: a mansion overlooking the Pacific, a collection of vintage sports cars, a yacht moored in the harbor, and of course, his prized helicopter that he piloted himself whenever he needed to clear his mind and escape the relentless pressures of his corporate empire. Today had been particularly exhausting, one of those days that tested even his formidable reserves of energy and patience. Back-to-back board meetings that stretched for hours, conference calls with international investors across multiple time zones, heated negotiations over a potential acquisition in Southeast Asia, and the constant pressure of maintaining his position at the top of the technology industry had worn him down to his very core. As he lifted off from his downtown office building's helipad, Marcus felt the familiar rush of freedom that only flying could provide. Up here, above the chaos of the city, soaring through the open sky like a bird released from its cage, he was just a man and his machine, gliding through the clouds with nothing but the hypnotic hum of the rotors and the endless expanse of sky stretching before him in every direction. He hadn't told his wife, Rebecca, that he was coming home early. Usually his Friday evenings were reserved for networking dinners at exclusive restaurants, industry events at the convention center, or entertaining potential clients at his private club. But tonight, he had cancelled everything, delegating his responsibilities to his vice president and clearing his schedule completely. He wanted nothing more than to surprise her, perhaps take her out to that elegant French restaurant on the waterfront that she loved so much, or simply spend a quiet evening together on their expansive terrace, sipping wine and watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson over the endless blue ocean. Their marriage had been strained lately. He knew that all too well. The long hours, the constant international travel that kept him away from home for weeks at a time, the perpetual distraction of building and maintaining his empire, the endless stream of problems that demanded his attention, had created a distance between them that he was only now beginning to fully recognize and understand. It was like watching a bridge slowly crumble, knowing something was wrong, but feeling powerless to stop the decay. Rebecca had been his college sweetheart, the woman who had believed in him when he was just a dreamer with ambitious ideas and empty pockets, when his visions of technological revolution were dismissed by everyone except her. She had supported him through the lean years, working 2 exhausting jobs to help pay their bills, while he poured every waking hour and every ounce of energy into his fledgling company. She had sacrificed her own career aspirations, her own dreams, to support his vision. When success finally came, when the company went public and their net worth multiplied overnight into figures that seemed almost obscene, Marcus had promised her the world, and he had delivered on that promise in material terms. The mansion, the designer clothes that filled an entire room of their house, the exotic vacations to Bali and the Maldives and the French Riviera, the jewelry that sparkled in velvet-lined cases, all of it was his way of showing gratitude for her unwavering support during those difficult early years. He had wanted to give her everything, to make up for all the times she had gone without, all the sacrifices she had made. But somewhere along the way, in the relentless pursuit of more success, more money, more recognition, he had forgotten that material possessions couldn't replace his presence, his attention, his love, his time. The realization had struck him during a particularly lonely business trip to Singapore the previous week. Sitting in yet another impersonal 5-star hotel room, surrounded by luxury but feeling utterly alone, he had scrolled through old photos on his phone, pictures of them from their early years together, laughing at inside jokes, dreaming about their future together, building a life from nothing but love and determination. When had they stopped laughing like that? When had he stopped really seeing her, really listening to her stories and her concerns? When had conversations about their hopes and dreams been replaced by brief exchanges about schedules and household logistics? As Marcus guided the helicopter toward the coast, following the familiar route home that he had flown hundreds of times before, he made a silent promise to himself. Things were going to change, starting today. He would delegate more responsibilities, trust his executive team to handle the day-to-day operations without his constant oversight, and reclaim the work-life balance that had become nothing more than a corporate buzzword in his vocabulary, a concept he preached to his employees but failed to practice himself. Rebecca deserved better than a husband who was physically present but emotionally absent, whose mind was always somewhere else, always on the next deal or the next problem. She deserved the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, the passionate dreamer who had time for long conversations and spontaneous adventures. The coastline came into view, a stunning ribbon of golden sand meeting the deep blue of the Pacific Ocean, waves creating white foam patterns that looked like lace from this altitude. Marcus descended slightly, enjoying the spectacular view of the exclusive neighborhood where they lived, an enclave of wealth and privilege that housed some of the most successful people in the country. From this height, he could see the geometric patterns of infinity pools that seemed to blend into the ocean beyond, the perfectly manicured lawns that looked like green carpets, the pristine tennis courts, and the private beaches that defined this world of the ultra-wealthy. It was a different world up here, he thought, literally and figuratively above the concerns of ordinary life, floating in a bubble of privilege and luxury. His mansion appeared on the horizon, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass and steel and clean lines, perched dramatically on a cliff overlooking the endless ocean. He had spared no expense when commissioning its design 5 years ago, hiring one of the world's most renowned architects, a Pritzker Prize winner whose buildings were featured in architectural magazines around the globe, to create a home that was both a sanctuary and a statement of his success. The property sprawled across 5 manicured acres, featuring everything from a state-of-the-art home theater with seating for 20 to a temperature-controlled wine cellar that housed over 5,000 bottles, to an Olympic-sized swimming pool with an infinity edge that created the illusion of water flowing directly into the ocean below. Rebecca had overseen much of the interior design, spending months selecting each piece of furniture, each work of art, each fabric, and finish with meticulous care and an artist's eye. She had transformed the architect's vision into a home, adding warmth and personality to the stark modern lines. Marcus had been too busy with work to participate much in those decisions, trusting her taste and signing checks without really paying attention to the details. Now, looking back, he realized that even that process, which should have been something they did together, had become another thing she handled alone. As Marcus approached for a better view, intending to circle the property before heading to his private helipad located a mile down the coast, something caught his eye and made him pause. There was a car in the circular driveway that he didn't recognize. A sleek black luxury sedan that definitely wasn't part of their extensive collection. His brow furrowed slightly with confusion. Rebecca hadn't mentioned having visitors today when they had spoken briefly on the phone that morning. Perhaps it was her sister visiting from San Francisco or one of her friends from the country club where she spent her afternoons playing tennis and lunching. He thought nothing more of it and continued his approach, banking the helicopter slightly for a better angle. The helicopter descended lower, and Marcus could now see the expansive terrace that wrapped around the entire back of the house like a wooden embrace. It was Rebecca's favorite spot, the place where she spent her mornings with coffee and a book, and her afternoons with wine and the ocean view. Often alone, he realized with a sharp pang of guilt that twisted in his chest. As the helicopter moved into position, offering him an unobstructed aerial view of the terrace and the pool area below, Marcus saw something that made his heart stop and his breath catch in his throat. There were two people on the terrace, two figures standing close together near the pool. Even from this height, he could recognize his wife's distinctive blonde hair that caught the golden light of the setting sun, and the red dress he had bought her from an exclusive boutique in Paris last month, a designer piece that had cost more than most people earned in a year. But she wasn't alone. A man was with her, tall and well-built, and they were standing remarkably close together, closer than friends, closer than appropriate. Marcus felt his grip tighten on the controls as he watched, his knuckles turning white, telling himself there was surely an innocent explanation. Maybe it was the pool maintenance supervisor discussing the new filtration system, or their estate manager going over some household matter that required her attention. But then he saw the man reach out and touch Rebecca's face with an intimacy that could not be mistaken for anything professional or platonic. A gentle caress that spoke of familiarity and affection. Marcus watched, completely frozen, unable to look away, as his wife leaned into the touch like a flower turning toward the sun, as the man pulled her closer with his other arm, as their bodies pressed together in an embrace that spoke volumes about familiarity and passion, and a connection that went far beyond friendship. And then they kissed, a deep, lingering kiss that seemed to last forever, a kiss that shattered Marcus's world into 1,000 jagged pieces that could never be put back together again. The helicopter wobbled slightly, dipping to one side, as Marcus's concentration faltered completely, his mind struggling desperately to process what his eyes were seeing, to reconcile this reality with everything he thought he knew about his life. His wife, the woman he had built everything for, the woman he had loved and trusted for over 2 decades, the woman who had stood beside him through poverty and success, was in the arms of another man, on their terrace, in their home. The home he had purchased to make her happy, the sanctuary he had created for their future together, the symbol of everything he had accomplished. Marcus circled higher, putting distance between himself and the scene unfolding below, but he couldn't look away, couldn't tear his eyes from the tableau of betrayal. He watched as they broke apart, laughing about something, their faces bright with joy and completely unaware of his presence overhead. The sound of the helicopter rotors would have alerted them if they had been paying attention to anything except each other, but they were too absorbed in their own world to notice the mechanical bird hovering above them. Rebecca said something, gesturing with her hands in that animated way she had when she was excited about something, and the man nodded enthusiastically, taking her hand in his and intertwining their fingers together as they walked side by side toward the massive glass doors leading into the house. A wave of nausea washed over Marcus as the full implications became crystal clear, as his mind began to process what this really meant. This wasn't a spontaneous moment of weakness, an unexpected lapse in judgment fueled by too much wine and loneliness. The comfort between them, the easy intimacy, the way they moved together in perfect synchronization, the way she touched him. It all spoke of an established relationship, something that had been going on for some time, something that had developed slowly and deliberately. How long had this been happening? Weeks, months, years even? How many times had this man been in their home, in their bedroom perhaps, lying in his bed while Marcus was away building his empire, while he was closing deals in boardrooms across the world, while he was giving speeches at conferences about success and achievement? The betrayal cut deeper than any business failure ever could, deeper than any financial loss or professional setback. Marcus had weathered market crashes that wiped out millions, hostile takeovers that threatened everything he had built, and fierce competition from rivals who wanted nothing more than to see him fail, all without flinching, without losing his composure or his determination. But this was fundamentally different. This was personal in a way that business could never be. This struck at the very core of his identity. not as a businessman or a millionaire or a corporate titan, but as a man, as a husband, as a human being who had given his heart and trust to another person. Everything he thought he knew about his life, about his marriage, about the woman sleeping beside him each night, had been revealed as an illusion, a carefully constructed facade that had just crumbled before his eyes like a sandcastle struck by a wave. He pulled the helicopter away from the house, his hands shaking slightly on the controls, his breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. He needed to think clearly, to process this information, to decide what to do next, with some semblance of rationality. Should he land immediately and confront them both, storm through the door and demand explanations and answers? Should he call her phone right now and listen to her scramble for excuses? Should he wait and gather more information, document the affair, build a case? A part of him, the wounded husband, the betrayed man, wanted to storm in there immediately and demand answers, to see the look on their faces when they realized they had been caught, to watch the color drain from Rebecca's cheeks as her perfect secret world collapsed around her. But another part of him, the calculating businessman who had built an empire through strategic thinking and careful planning, who never made important decisions in the heat of emotion, urged caution and restraint. Emotional decisions were bad decisions. He had built his success on thinking several moves ahead, on gathering all available information before acting, on maintaining control even in crisis situations. This situation, as personally devastating as it was, required the same approach. Marcus flew aimlessly for several long minutes, his mind racing through memories like a movie on fast forward, searching desperately for signs he had missed, clues he had been too blind or too busy to see. Had there been warning signals? Had Rebecca tried to tell him in subtle ways that she was unhappy, that their marriage was in trouble, that she needed more from him than money and status? He thought back carefully to recent months, analyzing conversations and interactions with new eyes, and the signs were suddenly obvious. The way she had seemed distant and distracted during their increasingly rare dinners together. The phone calls she would quickly end when he entered a room, claiming it was just her sister or a friend. The new intense interest in her appearance, the gym memberships and personal trainer sessions, the frequent salon appointments that seemed to multiply week by week, the expensive new lingerie he had discovered in her drawer. He had attributed all of it to her wanting to feel good about herself, perhaps dealing with a midlife crisis in her own way, perhaps even trying to make herself more attractive for him and rekindle their fading romance. Some part of him had even felt pleased that she was taking such good care of herself. Never had he imagined this scenario. Never had he connected these obvious dots into the picture of an affair. How could he have been so blind? How could someone so successful in business, someone known for reading people and situations, have missed something so significant happening in his own home? The irony wasn't lost on him, and it cut like a knife. He'd been planning to surprise her with his early arrival, to recommit to their marriage, to be a better husband starting today. He had been feeling guilty about his neglect, resolved to change his ways, ready to prioritize their relationship over his business for the first time in years. Instead, he had discovered the ultimate betrayal, the one thing that could never be undone or forgiven. All those business trips that took him away for weeks at a time, those late nights at the office when he would come home after she was already asleep, those missed anniversaries when he sent flowers and jewelry instead of showing up himself, those forgotten birthdays, had they driven her into another man's arms? Or had she simply stopped loving him, stopped believing in the dream they had once shared, stopped seeing a future with the man he had become? Marcus thought about the last time they had been truly intimate, not just physically but emotionally connected. He couldn't remember a specific moment, and that realization was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. When was the last time they had stayed up late talking about their dreams and fears, sharing their thoughts and feelings? When was the last time he had looked into her eyes and truly seen her? Not just the beautiful woman on his arm at charity galas and corporate events, not just the trophy wife who looked perfect in photographs, but the actual person she was inside, with her own needs and desires and disappointments. The painful truth was that he had neglected her terribly, taken her completely for granted, assumed she would always be there, waiting patiently while he conquered the business world and collected his trophies and accolades. But that didn't excuse what she had done. That's what his rational mind kept insisting. There were other options available to her: marriage counseling, separation, honest conversation about their problems and her unhappiness. Instead, she had chosen deception, chosen to betray the sacred vows they had made to each other all those years ago in that small church when they were young and poor and full of hope. The trust that had taken 2 decades to build carefully, brick by brick, moment by moment, had been destroyed in a single instant, shattered as completely and irreversibly as glass thrown with force against stone. As the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in increasingly dramatic shades of orange and purple and deep crimson, Marcus made a decision with the clarity that sometimes comes in moments of crisis. He wouldn't confront them today, not while his emotions were running so high and threatening to overwhelm his judgment, not when he was still processing the initial shock and his hands were still trembling on the controls. Instead, he would land at a nearby private airfield, check into a hotel under an assumed name, and approach this catastrophic situation with the same strategic mindset and careful planning he applied to his most challenging business problems. If Rebecca wanted out of their marriage, if she had found someone else who could give her what she needed, then he would deal with it appropriately and with dignity. But he would do so on his terms, with full control of the situation and all the advantages he could muster. He would hire the best divorce attorneys money could buy, the ruthless sharks who had represented celebrities and billionaires in high-profile splits. He would protect his assets carefully, his company that he had built from nothing, everything he had worked so hard to create and maintain. And he would do it quietly, discreetly, without the media circus that often accompanied high-profile divorces, without his competitors and rivals learning about his personal problems and seeing them as potential weaknesses to exploit. Marcus Wellington had built his formidable reputation on being 10 steps ahead of the competition, on anticipating problems before they materialized, and he wouldn't let his personal life be any different. But beyond the legal strategies and financial protections and tactical maneuvers, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he would need to face something far more difficult and painful than any business challenge: the emotional aftermath of this betrayal, the crushing loneliness that was already beginning to settle over him like a cold, suffocating fog, the questions that would haunt him in the quiet moments when he was alone with his thoughts, the second-guessing of every memory, every moment of their 20-year marriage, wondering what was real and genuine and what was merely a performance, wondering when her love had died and when the lies had begun. He turned the helicopter away from the coast and headed inland, leaving behind the mansion and all it represented, the life he had so carefully built, and the wife he thought he knew, but apparently never understood at all. The flight that was supposed to clear his mind and provide peaceful solitude had instead filled it with painful questions and devastating realizations.